We are privileged to have with us this morning no stranger here to Calvary, Jerry Thorpe. He has been the pastor at Temple Baptist Church in Odessa for 38 years, and he can correct me if any of this is wrong. 38 years, and he is pastor emeritus now of that congregation. He travels around all throughout the country and speaks at churches like ours and conferences, and we're just blessed to have him with us this morning. So would you give a nice, warm welcome to Jerry Thorpe?
Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, man. Good morning, Calvary. Really delighted to be back. I checked with my Calvary historian. That's Clark Bozier. When was the first time I came and did the youth conference out at the college? And he said it was in 1979. He was a freshman in high school. And that conference was huge then. It filled the entire auditorium over there at ABC. And then I think the next year, Dr. Oldham invited me here to Calvary. That was in 1980. That was a long time ago. But I've been here through the years and been here every year since Brian's been here for the last few years. So thank you. I'm delighted to be here. And thank you guys who were praying for me a year ago. I was a little spooky about what I was going through health-wise, but thanks for praying for me. When Brian and I got together on this deal, I said, you know, the Wednesday following this Sunday is Valentine's Day. How about I do a message on marriage and stuff? And he said, I think that would be great. So I am going to do a message on marriage entitled, give me my title of my message, next slide. Hello, there we go. Marriages are made in heaven, but they're lived out in Texas. You agree with that? Now, I know not everyone in this room is married. There are a lot of singles here, so I want to give you singles a little something here. I just came across this. I hope you haven't heard it. And really, I was just using it tonight in a banquet I'm going to give in Cleburne, but I thought you might get a kick out of it. I guarantee you a single guy wrote this, or a single lady. Said, it just dawned on me why Mayberry was so peaceful and quiet. Nobody was married. Here are the single people that come to mind. Andy Griffith, Aunt B, Barney, Floyd, Howard, Goober, Gomer, Sam, Ernest T. Bass, Helen, Thelma Lou, Clara. In fact, the only one married was Otis, and he stayed drunk. That's just wrong. For you guys that are single, a lot of you, most of you probably are looking forward to being married, so go to school on this. For you that are married, I'd like to give you some encouragement. Marriages are made in heaven, but they're lived out in Texas. Now, this morning I'm going to talk to you about having a successful marriage. And by successful marriage, I don't mean you're just tolerating each other, or just staying together for the kids' sake, or just existing together with very little joy, no fun, not much communication, not much laughter, not much affection, and no anticipation for the future. My theme verse is this, Proverbs chapter 5, verse 18, where the wise man said, rejoice with the wife of your youth. Guys, he wrote that to you. He wrote that to you married guys. As you grow older, I want you to keep having a great time with that girl you married when you were young. Rejoice. Have a great time as you grow older with that girl you married when you were young. Now, there are a lot of examples in our society of marriage failures. We don't need any more of that. But could I take a moment and congratulate the success stories? And forgive me for asking some of you to stand again. But would all of you that have been married 30 years or more, would you stand? Struggle to your feet. Okay, stay up a minute. Great, that's beautiful. All right, if you've been married 40 years or more, stay standing. Wow, we didn't thin it down much at all. If you've been married 50 years or more, stay standing. Wow, how great. Congrats. Should I go another step? If you've been married 60 years or more, stay standing. Looky here. Wow, let's give them a great hand. That's beautiful. I mentioned Clark Bozier. He told me he's having a new members reception at his church, and there were 40 or so people. Clark, for you that don't know, grew up in this church, was saved here and pastors a church of over 1,000 in Willa Park, right out of Fort Worth West now. And having new members reception, and they were going around introducing everyone, and there was an older couple there, and when it came to him, he told something about themselves and their life, and then he said, we've been married for 67 years. And everybody oohed and awed like we do, and then somebody asked the inevitable question, how do you keep a marriage together for 67 years? And Clark said his wife spoke for the first time and said, he just won't die. My wife is sitting right down here on June 2nd. We will have been married 60 years. How about that? We're pretty proud of that. But I will tell you up front, I am not an authority on marriage and raising children. Before I was married, I was an authority on it. But all of my beautiful theories about marriage got murdered by a gang of ugly facts. Before I got married, I could preach on subject like 10 steps to have a great marriage and raise perfect kids that'll never let you down. Then I got married and had 3 kids, and my message now would be something like, here are 3 things you might but probably should not try, that could but probably will not work. When Freddie and I married, we didn't know anything, we didn't even suspect anything. We knew we loved each other, and here came the kids. 10 months after we were married, Cheryl was born, 10 and a half months. And I know it was 10 and a half months because every single person in our church was counting on their fingers as the months went by. And then 2.5 years later, Alan came along, and then 9 years later, Kyle David was born. We should have named him Encore. He wasn't on the original program. He just showed up. And when Cheryl was born, our first child, we were so paranoid that nothing touched her mouth that had not been pasteurized, sanitized, sterilized, homogenized, and we wore gloves. By the time we got to Kyle David, he shared his bottle with a dog. We figured all that out about that time. But a good marriage is so beautiful. You know something, guys? When your marriage is right, almost everything in your world will be right. And when your marriage gets messed up, everything in your world kind of gets messed up. So what keeps people together? What makes a good marriage? Well, there's not an easy answer. I don't think there's some magical formula. But there's some wonderful biblical guidelines and some good common sense that works. So that's what I want to talk to you about this morning. So first of all, let's glorify with our first thought, marriages are made in heaven. And I want to give you a definition. Here's a slide of, this is as good a definition of marriage, I think, as I've ever read. Marriage is a commitment of love between 2 people that binds them together for life, and the fact of their marriage is known and recognized by their own society. When there was only one man and one woman in the biblical story in the first chapters of Genesis, Adam and Eve, God instituted the relationship we call marriage. Have you ever thought in the creation story for 5 days, God makes everything in this magnificent universe, He spoke it into existence. And on the 6th day, He made a man. At the first 5 days, out of everything God created, He said, that is very good. And on the 6th day, He made a man, and for the first time, God said, it is not good that man should be alone. So He made a woman to walk by his side. Here's the scripture on your screen. The rib the Lord God had taken from man, He made to a woman. He brought her to the man. And here's God's formula for marriage. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife or cleave to his wife, and they two shall become one flesh. Now, a woman told me her version of this story is that God made man, took one look at him and said, I can do better than that, and made a woman. My version of the story is God made man first so He could tell at least one story in his life without being interrupted and corrected by his wife. That's what I think about that. But the creation story is beautiful. God put in 3 guidelines from the beginning. First of all, He said, leave your father and mother. Now, what that means is a legal and public act that's recognized by your society. Moving in together is not God's formula. God's formula is a legal and public act. In our culture, you get a marriage license, someone with authority marries you. God said, I want you to make a statement that your society recognizes that you have pledged your life together. And then he said, I want you to cleave to each other. In other words, I want you to make this commitment because you love each other, a love that glues you together, a commitment to a permanent, lasting relationship till death do us part. You're to make a public act based on your love. And then God said, I've given you the idea that you become really one flesh. That's the sexual act, but it's more. It's two people living together and becoming one person. Now, our culture, of course, has turned this around, and we wonder why we're so messed up. Now, people start dating, and after a few dates, they crawl in the sack together and have sex. And then maybe they fall in love, and maybe they get married. And we wonder why we're messed up. Or we move in together that I mentioned earlier. And I'm not just trying to pound you. I just want to make a couple of thoughts here. The problem with that is, among the problems, is most of the couples who live together never get married. You get into a relationship, there's no commitment, there's no vows, it's easy to run away, covered by even more emotional scars and emotional baggage than when you began. And so you move in together and you go, but it doesn't work because it's not based on love and you haven't committed yourself. You don't work through the problems like you do in marriage. Marriage is God's plan, and God has not changed his mind about marriage. When Jesus came into this world, he said in Matthew 19:16, so then they are no longer two, but one flesh. And then God just kind of nailed it against the wall. Therefore, what I have joined together, let no man separate. Now, when I say marriage is made in heaven, that doesn't mean God picks out your wife or husband, but the institution of marriage and its protection, its guidelines, and its joys are of God. Marriages were made in heaven, but they're lived out in Texas. If marriages are made in heaven, we find out pretty quickly there's a collision between heaven and earth. And of course, there are difficulties, and I will name you several as we work our way along. The first one is this. Dating is not a true picture of marriage. Dating is a distorted picture of marriage. And I'm not knocking dating. Romance is a great stuff. But we ought to call our date life the Watergate period, because that's the greatest time we're covering up, because we're covering up sometimes all our difficulties. So this perfect person will marry us and make us happy all the rest of our life. It's like Freddie. She didn't date the real me. She dated my representative who I sent to date her. It was a cleaned up version of Jerry Thorpe, He was a really nice guy. But then you get married and all of a sudden all the truth comes out. So it's not a perfect picture of marriage. A lot of the stuff I've learned about marriage, I learned from a speaker we had in Odessa all the time, and they still do, named Charles Lowry. He's a trained psychologist and also pastored a great church. He said when he and his wife Penny were dating, she looked at him one day, and he said, I was realizing this was way out of my league. I was batting way over my average here with this girl. And said, she looked at me one day and said, Charles, do you like to go to the mall? And he said, I lied like a snake. I said, oh, Penny, I love to go to the mall. And he said, God heard me say that. And God turned to the birth angel and said, Charles is lying to her. When they get married, give them 3 girls. He'll spend his life in the mall. And that's what Charles said happened. You see, when you get married, you're going to learn some things you didn't know, and some of those things will bring you so much joy, and some of them will irritate you. Someone once said, love is blind, but marriage is a real eye-opener, and that's true. One of the big reasons that dating is a distorted picture of marriage is that in too many marriages, and I'm going to hurt you with this most of the rest of the hour, how we treated each other in dating stops. See what I said? The reason it's distorted is we keep ourselves on one level of romance and behavior and excitement, and then sometimes we quit doing all the stuff that made us fall in love in the beginning. The second reason marriage is tough is because people are so different. They're just natural differences between people. I made a short list. You'll get married, you'll find one likes to go to bed early and the other likes to stay up late. And one likes country music and one likes classical music. And one is always prompt and the other is always late. And one is a babbling brook and the other is the Dead Sea. And one loves to spend money and the other is a tightwad. And one loves to cuddle, but the other is a porcupine. You'll find out when you get married, you're just different. Again, Charles Lowry said his wife Penny is not only beautiful, she is organized. She believes cleanliness is next to godliness and everything has its place and it better be there. He said, I knew I was in trouble when she cleaned up the rice at the wedding before we left to go on our honeymoon. And he said, if you look in her closet, it's color-coded and all the shoes face north. And there was a time I got up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom and she made the bed while I was in the bathroom. He said, that's probably why God brought her into my life. I think cleanliness is next to impossible. I think the poster bed is for pants and shirts and underwear. She has beautiful matching towels and they're all color-coded. He said, I would only have 2 towels. One would be wet, one would be dry. I'd use them for 6 months and I'd throw them away and get another pair. So Charles said, why did God bring us together? He said, God likes to laugh. That's why he put us together. Sometimes I wonder how any of us make it because we're so different. It's like men are from Mars and women are from Venus in a book from some years ago. I just got a little list. A woman dresses to express, Freddie dresses to express herself. I just dress to keep from being naked. And it takes Freddie forever to figure it out. She's got everything, and she'll change 4 or 5 times. I grab a shirt, pair of pants. If they don't stink too bad and have no visible stains, I've got an outfit. I don't care about the rest of it. We're just different. Freddie has a purse. It's a big purse. It's one of many purses. I just carry a little wallet. I don't have a formal wallet and a casual wallet. I don't have a color-coded wallet. I just have a wallet because we're different. Freddie has pillows all over our bed. Have to clean them babies off at night before we go to bed. I've tried to reason with her. How many heads do we have in this organization? I got 1 head. How many you got? You got 1 head. We only need 2 pillows, but we don't have just 2 pillows. We got pillows everywhere. We're just different. We drive differently. To a man, driving is competition. That's the reason we don't like to stop, because if I stop, that truck that I finally got around will pass me while I'm stopped at the rest area. To a man, the solution to being lost is to drive faster. One guy said, marriage is not so hard, it's the living together it's rough, and that's right, because we're so different. So, can I give you 60 years worth of advice, guys? You will never totally understand her. Now, there's a lot of stuff you'll understand, but you're a man, she's a woman. So there's a good piece of advice that James gave in chapter 1, I think verse 19, where James said, so do these 3 things. Be swift to hear in your marriage. You're swift to listen, to shut up. Quit trying to out-argue, out-shout. You're bigger, you're stronger, okay. So you want to get it on? No. James said, be swift to hear, be slow to speak, and slow to wrath. Here's about a 2-minute video. It's one of the greatest examples. You talk about a smart husband. Here's one, but watch what he's facing. This is funny.
It's just, there's all this pressure, you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me. And I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
No, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See, you're
out.
not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just... Sometimes it's like there's this achy... I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
Yeah, that sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Oh, come on. If you would just...
Don't...
Try to see things my way. Do I have to keep on talking till I can go on? We can work it out.
That's classic. It's not about the nail. Next thing to keep that marriage made in heaven working on earth is you got to deal with the grass is greener complex, or the danger of comparing. As Brandon said, for 36 years I pastored what became the largest church in Odessa, Texas, so I dealt with a lot of people. And I used to hear, you know, Jerry, my husband's got these problems, and he's got a lot of, you know, and my wife's got this and that. But this person that I work with, I think they're perfect. This man down the street, we talk, I think he's perfect. And we begin comparing. And when we begin comparing, we usually get in trouble because, guys, please listen to me, there are no perfect people. Did you hear me? There are no perfect people, but we think there are. A psychiatrist said one time, every person on earth has about 10 good traits and probably 10 bad traits. If you get all hung up on the difficulties in your marriage and say this person probably has no difficulties and you leave what you have and marry them, you'll find out that they got about 10 good traits and they have about 10 bad traits. You see, that's what the devil got Eve to doing, feeling sorry for herself. I know you've got all these trees in the garden. You can eat any of the trees in the garden. But she said, but if I had that tree, my life would be perfect. And the devil said, you're right. If you ate of that tree, your life would be perfect. So she didn't talk to her husband, and she certainly didn't talk to God, and she took the fruit of the tree, and she was wrong. Her life wasn't perfect. I think that's what happened to us when we get to comparing and thinking, well, we've got a little difficulties in this, so we start shopping. No, look, marriage is not easy. Marriage works because two good people are willing to work very hard to make it successful. You're willing to have patience. You're willing to overlook a lot of stuff. You're willing to hang on. You're willing to let love be your first guide. And you're willing to put your marriage in the hands of God. And you've realized that marriage is the most satisfying and rewarding of life's experiences. But it takes work. So when I was pastoring, people had been married a while, and they'd come to me and they'd say, Jerry, I think I married the wrong person. And I always said, that's okay, everybody did. Everybody married the wrong person because there are no perfect people. May I give you a principle? Life does not have to be perfect to be wonderful. Life doesn't have to be perfect to be wonderful. Sometimes our problem is 90% of the the person that we're married to is just wonderful. And we spend all our time worrying about the 10% that's not so good, and instead of enjoying the 90% that's just wonderful. The dangers of comparing. So I think there are 3 commitments you need to make in your marriage. First of all, you must accept that other person. Ladies, this is you. Give up on changing them. I know you go to the movies and that's a handsome hunk up there and you look at it. No, give up on changing them. And sometimes we badger, if you'd only do this or you'd change this or you'd wear this and you'd do that. No. Give up on changing them. We can tear people up trying to make them look like this fantasy we have in our head. Accept them like Adam accepted Eve. God brought Eve to Adam. Do you think he fussed at God because her hair wasn't the right color or she wasn't the right size? No. God said, this is the girl. And the longer Freddie and I are married, I realize God put the perfect one. Accept that other person. And second, be attentive. Give them time. Meet their needs. Submit to them. Ephesians 5 said, submit to one another, submit to each other. Marriage is not 50-50. Marriage is 100-100. You're 100% for your wife. You're 100% for your husband. Put that other person first in your life. Make him a king. Make her a queen. That's what you did in your date life. You put the other person first and gave them total attention. You centered your world around them. Why did your world ever stop being centered around them? And third, keep affection at the center of your marriage. I want to talk to you guys for the next few minutes. In every survey that people do, what are the 10 things that are most important? man is sex and stuff like that. It's always, but the woman is always affection. Your wife wants and needs affection. Affection, sir, should be the canopy that covers your marriage. Now, when you were dating, you were affectionate and you were a lover. And then sometimes we get married and all of that stuff ceases. So I'm going to ask you guys a few questions. How long has it been since you were just romantic? How long since you did the stuff that made her fall in love with you in the beginning? How long since you had a romantic dinner together or a romantic weekend, just the two of you? How long since you were just really sweet? Let me ask another question. How long since it was fun to live with? You couldn't wait till you got home because you were just so much fun to live with. You say, oh, come on, preacher. Now, I ain't a lover. I'm a carpenter. I'm a lawyer. I'm a salesman. No. Well, I know, but she didn't marry you because you were a carpenter. She didn't marry you because you were a salesman or a lawyer. She married you because you were a lover. And you were a good one, too, you smooth-talking devil, you. You were a good one. I'll tell you how good you were. She bought it, right? And thought that's the way it's always going to be. So what were you doing? Go back. Hey, go back with me in your life. What were you doing that made you two fall in love? I'll tell you some things I know you were doing. First of all, you made time for her. I don't care what was on TV. I don't care if it's the first day of any season. I don't care if the fish are biting or not. She came first in your life. I don't care what's showing on the TV. She came first in your life. And there was time together, and you talked 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 and you talked. You go to a restaurant today and look around, and you'll tell the difference at the table between the married couples and the unmarried couples, because unmarried couples talk and hold hands and pat and slobber and this kind of stuff. And married couples talk a little bit like pass the salt. You know, meat's tough, stuff like that. But you fell in love communicating. Why did you ever quit? Your wife wants to communicate. She wants to talk. You've got to do that. And there were love notes. Some of you became poets. And there was candy. Just because she's sweet. They're flowers. Just because you're so pretty. And you noticed and complimented everything. Do you remember back when you were dating, you walked in, and when you saw her, you noticed everything about her. Oh, wow. Wow. You're absolutely lovely. I love your hair. I love it when you wear your hair that way. Ooh, that perfume. I love that perfume. That dress looks great on you. I love your dress. I love your shoes. I love your mother. And you noticed everything and complimented everything. And you remember when you got ready to go, she put her hand in your arm and that made you feel good, and you walked out to the car, and when you got to the car, she took her hand off your arm and reached for the car door. You remember what you said? Whoa. As long as you're with me, those beautiful hands of yours will never touch a car door, ever. Opened it up, shut the door, went in and sat down. You remember what you said? You said, what would you like to do tonight? And she said, oh, whatever you... No. As long as you're with me, it'll never be what I want to do. It'll always be what you want to do. Where would you like to eat tonight? Oh, whatever you... No, honey, no. As long as you're with me, it'll never be what I want to eat. It'll always be what you want to eat. In other words, our whole approach is what will make you happy. You know something, guys? We've all got a love tank. It's like a gas tank. It can be full, it can be empty. Probably when you two met, your love tanks were on empty. But all of a sudden, something began to happen. You can't explain it. You can't define it. You don't know what makes this person different than all the other persons you've dated. But all of a sudden, the love tank begins to fill. And you realize, whoa, something's going on here that's really good. And the love tank gets a quarter full and then a half full. And all of a sudden, you're both just concentrating on keeping that relationship beautiful and strong. And it gets 3/4 full, and you start thinking rings. You start thinking dates. And I married hundreds, I guess, of couples when I was pastoring, and they walked down and their love tanks were overflowing. And the stuff I've just been talking about is the reason the love tank was overflowing. But sometimes after you get married, you quit doing all the stuff that made you fall in love, and the love tank goes down. It's 3/4 and then a half, and then a quarter gets empty. And then a lady started coming to me and said, Jerry, I don't know what happened. I mean, when we were dating, he was so romantic. He was so thoughtful. He was so much fun to be with. And like when we got married, it slowly all went away. I thought I had married Brad Pitt, Rudolph Valentino on a good day. But what I have now is just a recliner that burps is all, just over in the corner. God said, now, preacher, I don't know. Now, preacher, when I was marrying her, that woman was a hot potato. I'm telling you, preacher, that girl was turned on. But now, I don't know. She's changed. I'm telling you, preacher, she's a cold fish now. That woman's changed. And I said, no, bud, you're dead wrong. You're dead wrong. That's the same girl you married. I'll tell you what changed. You changed. Because you quit treating her the way you were treating her when she fell in love with you. And the love tank got empty. So we've all got to decide, is our marriage a contract or a covenant? Is my marriage for life or is it for a while? For marriage to be a lifetime treasure like these beautiful people that stood up this morning, there's one question you've got to answer. Is it a covenant? Is it a contract? Now the Bible views marriage obviously as a covenant. Rejoice with the wife of your youth. What God has put together, let not man put asunder. Society views marriage as a contract, and there's a vast difference. A covenant is something you keep. It's an incredible promise, for better, for worse, for richer, for poor, in sickness and in health. For how long? For as long as you both shall live. That's the promise, that's the covenant. You know something? I bet there's a whole lot of you guys that are up around Freddie and I's age that when you got married, that's all you had. You had a covenant, you had a promise. When Freddie and I got married, we left to go on a week's honeymoon in Colorado. We had $80 cash and a Gulf gas card to take a week's vacation. Came home with money too. Amazing. Oh, and also an incredible promise that the night before we left, we stood in the church and I held her hand with my father and a pastor friend, and I promised God that I will love you till the day we die. It's a covenant. Now, society says it's a contract, and all contracts are based on the foundation of reciprocity. A marriage that plays out as a contract says, if you do these things for me, then I will do these things for you. Professional athletes have a contract. You pay me, I'll play for you. But as they get older, the contract's not renewed. That thinking ignores the fact that people are always changing and life is challenging. Freddie and I are neither one the person we were 59 years ago when we got married. We don't look the same, we don't think the same, we don't react the same. A contract says when all those changes come, if you don't like it, get out. A covenant says, I will love you through all the changes. Let me ask you a question. And I know you have seen a couple, been married maybe for a good long while, and one of them gets a very serious, debilitating, sometimes terminal disease, and the other one waits on them hand and foot by their bedside 24 hours a day. It's a long, painful. They clean them up, they feed them, they're up night and day. There is no romance, there's no travel, there's very few happy days as we normally think of happy days. Why do they do that? Because they made a covenant. I will love you till death do us part. You see, the Bible makes it clear my marriage is for life. My marriage is not just a commitment to Freddie, it's also a commitment to God. That doesn't mean you stay in a marriage that's abusive or mutually destructive, but otherwise you can work it out. The grass is not greener on the other side of the fence. The grass is generally greener over the cesspool. You might keep it in mind. Some years ago, some people in our church in Odessa wrote some thoughts about their marriage. I said, if you've been married 25 years or more, write and tell me. This was just brilliant. She said, they don't understand that listen to this, that being in love with someone is not the same as loving someone. Get the change? Being in love is like standing in the shore and the huge breakers and the crashing waves pounding. It's exciting, it's beautiful, but you can't live there. Soon after marriage, you leave the crashing waves and pull into the safe harbor, the calm bay, where love can be nourished and grow into something deeper and richer than they ever could imagine. One said, we found, they've been married 45 years, a sense of humor, having the ability to laugh at ourselves and all the absurdities of two completely different and totally inadequate individuals making a life together. Married 31 years. It took a while for us to work things out, but we stayed together. We took a few small steps, and after a while, we realized we had a pretty good marriage. I have a plaque in our bedroom that says, marriage is the union of two forgivers. He said that about sums it up. Married 34 years, we never felt it would be easier without each other. You see, that's what it takes. You got to work at it. It's hard work holding on to the promise. Well, you say, well, what about our differences? You work through them. When I was pastoring, people come and say, well, Jerry, I don't know where this is going to make because my wife and I are incompatible. And I always said, well, so what? So are Freddie and I. We're the two most incompatible. I mean, I'm outgoing, fools rush in where angels fear to tread. Freddie's the total opposite. But it works good for both of us. We both need each other. Just because you have some tension over things doesn't mean you've got a bad marriage. Work it out. Lower your voices. Listen. Take your time. Get help if you need it. Life is always changing, but don't ever give up. Please don't give up. It's risky to get married, but anything worthwhile in life is risky. Sometimes you hang on. A diamond is a piece of coal that stayed on the job. Did you ever notice you ever been to where two rivers came together? You ever noticed how turbulent it is when they first come together? It is. It's choo. But if they stay together, they sail on more majestic, more beautiful, broader, stronger than ever. That's what your marriage ought to do. Sure, when you get married, you go through trouble sometimes, but hang on. And I got one last brief thought. I'd like to challenge you to put a stamp on your marriage. You ought to stamp your marriage something that is stamped on almost everything you buy. It's stamped on it. On the bottom, it'll say made in China or Mexico or United States or somewhere. Why don't you stamp on your marriage, this marriage is made in heaven. My goal for your marriage is that you could honestly say, if I had it to do all over again, I'd do that with you. And I might close by saying, probably a lot of us would say, if it weren't for Jesus Christ and the church, we'd have never made it. If it hadn't been for Jesus Christ, if we didn't have the love, the forgiveness of Jesus Christ, if we weren't in a church surrounded by great people who gave us such great examples of marriage and was preached to and sung like we sung of the love of the Lord and the majesty of the Lord, if it hadn't been for the church and Jesus Christ. So let me go a step further. Maybe if your marriage is trouble, maybe the missing ingredient for one or both of you is Jesus Christ. Maybe what you need is an experience with the Lord where you come in contact and ask Him to forgive your sins and to come into your life, accept you, receive you as you receive Him as Savior. And I'd like to close this way. I know we're always a little down in bad weather and a lot of flu and this and that, but there's a lot of beautiful married couples here. I'd like to challenge you to do something this morning. In a moment, we're going to stand and Brandon will come and sing something softly. I'd like to ask you guys, husband and wife, step out together and walk down here and either stand or if you can kneel. And I want you to do this. First of all, I just want you to talk to each other a minute. Say, honey, I just want you to know how much I love you. And then I want you to pray together. One of you pray and ask God's blessing on your marriage. And then you can kiss her. I give you permission from God to give her a little kiss. Now, I don't want fire to shoot out her ears. None of that foolishness. Just a little kiss. And then you may go back and sit down. But I think something about the church, kneeling in the church, praying together in the church, does a lot. Maybe if your marriage is troubled, just come, join with all of us, and get on your knees and just ask the good Lord to bless your marriage and give you wisdom. And for you that are single, you might want to come and kneel down and say, God, somewhere in this world is the person I'm going to marry, and pray for them. Pray that God will keep them clean. God will keep them close to Him until you meet them and get married. I think that would be a good prayer. Would you do it?